This is part of the ongoing development of the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net. This is an effort to recognize a natural organization for topics under the heading of society. Here it is, March 15th, 2011, and I'm back trying to organize background information on society. One of the most important things is to recognize that much of what's taught in academia is blatantly false. The first thing we have to remove is this concept of the noble savage. I will show a clip that helps gain insight into that.
Images like this from the Auschwitz concentration camp have been seared into our consciousness during the 20th century and have given us a new understanding of who we are, where we've come from, and the times we live in. During the 20th century, we witnessed the atrocities of Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Pol Pot, Rwanda, and other genocides. And even though the 21st century is only 7 years old, we have already witnessed an ongoing genocide in Darfur and the daily horrors of Iraq. This has led to a common understanding of our situation, namely that modernity has brought us terrible violence, and perhaps that native peoples lived in a state of harmony that we have departed from to our peril. Here's an example from an op-ed on Thanksgiving in the Boston Globe a couple of years ago, where the writer wrote, "The Indian life was a difficult one, but there was no employment problems, community harmony was strong, substance abuse unknown, crime nearly non-existent. What warfare there was between tribes was largely ritualistic and seldom resulted in indiscriminate or wholesale slaughter." Now, you're all familiar with this treacle. We teach it to our children. We hear it on television and in storybooks. Now, the original title of this session was "Everything You Know Is Wrong," and I'm going to present evidence that this particular part of our common understanding is wrong. That in fact, our ancestors were far more violent than we are, that violence has been in decline for long stretches of time, and that today we are probably living in the most peaceful time in our species' existence. Now, in the decade of Darfur and Iraq, a statement like that might seem somewhere between hallucinatory and obscene, but I'm going to try to convince you that that is the correct picture. The decline of violence is a fractal phenomenon. You can see it over millennia, over centuries, over decades, and over years, although there seems to have been a tipping point at the onset of the Age of Reason in the 16th century. One sees it all over the world, although not homogeneously. It's especially evident in the West, beginning with England and Holland around the time of the Enlightenment. Let me take you on a journey from several powers of 10 from the millennium scale to the year scale to try to persuade you of this. Until 10,000 years ago, all humans lived as hunter-gatherers without permanent settlements or government. And this is the state that's commonly thought to be one of primordial harmony. But the archaeologist Lawrence Keeley, looking at casualty rates among contemporary hunter-gatherers, namely, which is our best source of evidence about this way of life, has shown a rather different conclusion. Here's a graph that he put together showing the percentage of male deaths due to warfare in a number of foraging or hunting and gathering societies. The red bars correspond to the likelihood that a man will die at the hands of another man as opposed to passing away of natural causes in a variety of foraging societies in the New Guinea highlands and the Amazon rainforest. And they range from a rate of almost a 60% chance that a man will die at the hands of another man to, in the case of the Gabuski, only a 15% chance. The tiny little blue bar in the lower left-hand corner plots the corresponding statistic from the United States and Europe in the 20th century, and it includes all the deaths of both world wars. If the death rate in tribal warfare had prevailed during the 20th century, there would have been 2 billion deaths rather than 100 million.
This clip is fundamental to gaining insight. Three fundamental insights are missing from being mentioned. mentioned about men that didn't mention about women. Women were and are the major motivation for tribal conflict, one tribe attacking another to take the women, to get the beautiful young women. What is the genetic impact on men and a genetic impact on women? Those are two different things. What tended to survive amongst the women in this harsh environment would give us some insight into women today. Second, what was tended to survive among the men that would give us insight into male development today, and the problems that males and females have, and what their advantages and disadvantages are, that we might see more clearly the implications for society today. Men that were strong and could work together in cooperation with other men were what tended to survive in battle over those who would be manipulative or divisive or something like that. Women was a completely different situation. They were taken against their will, forced to have children they didn't want to conceive. And how could they have power in their physically power? They were physically inferior, so they could deceive, and they could manipulate. They could manipulate the authorities of the tribe, priest or witch doctor or chief or whatever. And you see this today too, but men of honor get angry at evil. They want to confront it and do something about it and work together and get other men and go into battle against the evil, or to defend the home and work together with others to defend the home. It's a natural survival trait for men. But anger to a woman is a threat. Not all, but most. And it's so we're psychologically healthy men are able to get angry. Below anger is an oppressed man. Above anger is interest and joy and higher levels. But for a woman, anger is threatening. It's gotten, and this idea of that they could gain power by manipulating the politics of the community, it's gone so far. Women can get rid of their man, take the baby, have any man they want, and the father of their children has to pay. And there many communities even have laws. I was angry with my wife because of a real problem, and I stopped the car and was parked, and the police came up. Someone had put in a legal complaint because they heard me raise my voice with my wife, and that was against the law in that community. A man can't even get angry. So it's really and in Russia, to see, we have the 2x2 home ministers, and include women that they have for the past 100 years. But one of the women ministers from Russian background, from Kazakhstan, even said she has trouble preaching Father God because men are so disrespected in Russia. I'm talking about in Russia, a Russian home. But these things have real implication. The political degradation, the breakdown of the home, the women's liberation, acting on these primordial genetic motivations to control rather than care for the raising of healthy boys and girls. but rather choosing professional life and hiring wet nurses and babysitters and early kindergarten and what have you. And there's genetic problems here. Look into the research. The highest, it's interesting, psychiatrists have a higher suicide rate than their patients, but they use suicide as a rationale for prescribing all kinds of drug treatments. It used to be lobotomies, and now it's electroshock treatment, equivalent to dropping a 15-pound baby off a 10-foot high building and calling it therapy. But they have a higher suicide rate than their patients. But women doctors have a higher suicide rate than psychiatrists or dentists. This is published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, look at the conflict between what is good, what is right, and how do we overcome what might be genetic predisposition to something that is actually destructive of society, and how do we protect the rights of the unborn and the child to that love that they are able to love and be a healthy component of society, able to confront evil rather than submit to it. I've separated out culture as having to do with child rearing, but social development so much information that, and so much sophistication in names invented in academic levels of study that people have had to memorize. It's still a bit of a mess to try and naturally organize and understand. Though what appears to me this morning as I again approach this set of maybe 100 separate items to put in an organization to help form a picture that helps someone organize their experience, I've come to what I believe is an insight into organizing. And the thing is to talk about phenomena on physical and behavioral reality. That is, what physical events were the transitions in the development of social behavior, and what behavioral events, that is mainly physiological, like the development of speech. I realize now the development of logical speech is a phenomena that degraded humankind, because they could invent concepts that weren't real and teach fear of them as if they were real. Fear of this and fear of that, and invent gods and evils, and play on the fears and indoctrinate fears and degrade the level of rationality of behavior. Major events in humankind, and the phenomena, events that worked against that, the main things like transportation, the development of boats and motion along rivers that made for social development of military enlargement to be able to dominate larger areas and bring law and order within those areas. a wonderful event. In the background, we know that hunter-gatherer tribes before verbalization and after, much of survival had to do with mixing, getting wives from different tribes, different groups, and that phenomena led to often warfare, and women dominated and men in conflict. These are some of the major phenomena of the development of domestication, how important that was, the dramatic changes that happened when the taming of the horse, that these armies that before were limited to moving along the major rivers for transportation and not able to move very fast inland, with the development of the horse, they could make lightning swift raids over long areas. And also the type of method of getting food, the development. I'm so impressed with the development of the family farm and the effect it had. Like in China, the family farm led to the worship of elders, even, and respect for elders. And the same thing was existent in my mother's time. From the 100 years previous, in the 1800s, it was mainly the family farm in America. And it was the family farmers that tended to immigrate from the domination of Europe, of the aristocracy in Europe. So all of these things, the development of affluence, the development of aristocracy, to put these things in an order is appeals to me now as the natural way to organize societal development based on its physical and psychological factors, psychological being dependent on the physiological development. The biggest single factor that separated out humans from animals, that they could be much worse or much better in terms of their behavior and care for the well-being of the group, the major development was language. This we know from the differences in male and female brain was mainly in the male. One hemisphere of the brain was logical verbal in the male, and the other pattern nonverbal, where the female, both brains are pattern nonverbal dominant, and verbal is in both brains. If you think about it, it's a no-brainer. The men had engaged in warfare, and it was their ability to communicate and work together, and being able to have verbal, logical plans, whether for making warfare on the wild animals, or warfare on with the neighboring tribes. The ability to make logical plans into the future and to share these plans verbally was much more important for male survival than it was for female survival. So that logical verbal dominance tended to develop more in a male than a female is not a strange thing. The next major event after the development of language was the ability to plan travel, to make a plan to immigrate, and to have it as an organized thing understood by all involved. And this led to immigration, even into areas that seemed inhospitable, moving further north or further south. The next major physical event from immigration was the changing of skin color from black to yellow for middle latitudes and from yellow to white for northern latitudes. The next, after immigration, and along with immigration, was the development of transportation by boats to move along rivers. This led to the development of regions governed as villages built up, and there was a governance within the village and then warfare between villages. But major transportation was limited to along the rivers until the domestication of animals like the horse, the camel, the elephant. This led to the ability to enlarge conflict and domination for law and order in inland areas. A major event. Behaviorally, as cities and governance developed, originally, that is, in the first generation, the leaders were those who were the natural leaders in warfare, and when they would reach a point of peace, the people that had gained respect for the command, that is, the men that had gained respect for command, would be the ruler of the community, however large it might be. This, we can look at the Middle East and see the process of enlargement from city-states to larger and larger areas, and the same phenomena happened in China. Africa, until modern times, had still been on a limited, much of it on a limited tribal area. But China and India and Europe had developed into city-states. And the next very important phenomena here is affluence, that the next generation after developing the ruling class as those who had been the leaders in winning the war, that there tended to be an inheritance of power into their children. And from a farming perspective, this would make sense, that the sons of the farmer who work with the farmer are on the land, and the farmer dies and the sons have the land. That's a no-brainer. But that model tended to go on to power in a kingdom. I want to emphasize two things here. First of all, the male inheritance of land had to do with farm animals dominating. A period before that where land was mainly gardening where the males were hunting and the females were gardening, inheritance of the property was along the female line. You can find that in many societies. But the awareness that affluence corrupts, and that the children of power, to have children inherit power from the powerful, is a poor concept, was recognized in the Jewish Bible by Moses. In that literature, the power was not by inheritance, it was judges. That wherever the need might be, there would be a judge developed. And it was against the advisement of the overseers of that culture, the prophets, to install a king as neighboring countries or tribes. They were mainly city-states at an earlier time, enlarging into what we would call a country. But they had kings, like the king of Syria. But the advice to the Hebrew culture was to have judges, and it was Saul was the first king sometime later, and then David after him. But this led to the corruption that was prognosticated, that is, told in advance by the Jewish prophets, that they should just find judges spontaneously out of the need of the time, not that it be by inheritance, and the idea of having a king. And it's different there because the major reality is women are not so attached to their children. And in affluence, they want babysitters and wet nurses. They don't want the burden of their children. And that goes back to hundreds of thousands of years of being taken by rape, and the children not a product of will, and oftentimes the mother themselves not being shown a very high level of mammalian love in their early childhood development. And as affluence develops, children are cared for by paid servants, or volunteers, or forced off onto relatives, like mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles end up being the care for their grandchildren.
South Korea really has a unique place as being the host of a G20 because it's not that long ago that it was considered a developing country. Today it is the world's 13th richest economy. There's been an incredibly rapid rise to riches here, but as I've been finding out, that hasn't been without its consequences. Survive. Archive footage shows a ruined city, buildings flattened, major thoroughfares reduced to rubble. And this is the very same Seoul street nearly 60 years later. It's been a remarkable transformation. From being an international battlefield, South Korea literally rose from the ashes, transforming itself from one of the world's poorest countries to one of the richest. It means South Korea has experienced opposite ends of the wealth spectrum, all in the space of a generation. The pressure on South Koreans doesn't end with their education. This is a wealthy society enjoying everything that modern life has to offer. But it is also a society with the highest suicide rate in the developed world. The evidence is that as this country got richer, the suicide rate went up. Here at Seoul's main cathedral, they're trying to help.
This one tells that life is precious.
The Catholic Church runs workshops for young people trying to combat chilling statistics showing that a suicide takes place in South Korea every 34 minutes. Their helpline takes calls from those who feel they have no one to turn to.
When we were in poor country, we all were very happy because we lived all the time with our family members and we can share all the things with them. But after the industrialization, everything was changed. So everyone goes to their office, their own office, and no one look back, no one care for another.
It's a high-pressure, fast-moving society, though try telling that to those stuck in the Seoul traffic, facing a grueling commute at the end of a long working day. This is a country proud of its achievements, proud to host the G20, but also aware that the pace of change has come at a price for its people.
The nursing bond is very much weakened over the family farm where the infant was with the mother. I've grown in great respect for the family farm and the effect that it has on a culture, that is the rearing of children, and on a society, that is the ability of people to respect other people. Because I see in China, not from the ruling class, but from the farming community, growing such things as Buddhism and Taoism, that respect for nature, respect for others, and respect for elders. Growing out of the family farm background. What a wonderful model, and I think we need to very much look at these things. That in the modern times really started with the horse and the ability to move armies over large areas of land and to communicate. So the horse, along with the boat, led to the ability of larger and larger areas to become under law and order. There's an important point here that written language sometimes was a major factor, but not always. The Mongols and the Turks invaded and dominated many areas without basic written language as their foundation, but verbal communications. And we need to understand the Romans were welcomed and respected in much of the world because they brought law and order. They my model is if you walked in Turkey with a Bible today, you would probably be killed. Many have been, and there's much contempt for those who would openly preach Jesus. But that was the land of the seven churches. Under Roman rule, you could walk around with the Bible. It wasn't the government that was against you, although those that worship different gods might be angry that you were taking away their livelihood. They made a profit from selling their pottery or religious pottery or something. But what's the purpose here? The purpose is to organize the natural phenomena of physical, psychological development as factors of individual behavior affected group behavior, and to understand the things that harm and degrade that, and understand the background, that we might be able to better deal with the problems present day and build a better future. The main thing that stands out to me with the development of language human behavior became degradable, so such an extent that when we say he's acting like an animal to talk about bad behavior, no, that's not true. He's acting like a human being with bad behavior, and the logic, the ability to see and control and look into the future and make plans for good or evil, that's not animal level, that's human level. The abstract language, the ability to logically plan and act on things that are not seen, and give the reality psychologically to things that aren't seen. That's very much a human phenomena. Now, the other thing here is to understand and see what degrades human society, and it is the lack of healthy homes for child rearing. So that then gets into culture. The society is the foundation for the culture. It's what determines how well young people are cared for and how well they're able to care for the next generation, and how much respect there is for the knowledge of good and evil.
Babies abandoned and left to die in the middle of rubbish in Karachi. Their parents would have faced up to 7 years imprisonment if they had been caught, but that hardly ever happens. Volunteers from the Eddy Foundation recovered the 2 bodies in the middle of the rubbish. It is a sad routine for Mohammed, who's been driving Eddy's ambulances for 25 years.
I've collected too many bodies, I can't even count them. Each time it's difficult, but once it was particularly painful. I went to pick up 2 babies, 2 girls in a rubbish dump. They had been eaten by dogs, their small bodies were completely mutilated.
In this conservative Muslim country, the birth of children outside of marriage is condemned, and adultery is a crime punishable by death under strict interpretations of Islamic law. Infanticide is a crime on the rise. The association recovered more than 1,000 babies from rubbish dumps last year. Some are illegitimate children, handicapped, or simply born to poverty-stricken families. And statistics are frightening. 9 times out of 10 they are girls.
Poor people abandon their daughters as they think that they'll be a liability in the future. Economic conditions are getting worse, and a family needs at least $1 million rupees to get a girl married off.
That's almost $12,000, and the cost of a wedding can simply be crippling for poor families.
Here again, I would end this introduction with the realization that children have been destroyed. The problem in Pakistan today, the finding babies in the garbage. Supposedly they have so much respect for life, but it's not true. If you study the infanticide, the killing of babies, and killing of unwanted daughters, and because they're not helpful in warfare was a tradition, or because they didn't want to get raided for their young females by the next tribe. But this phenomena is historical. Again, grounded on the fact that many women were taken by rape, and the children were not a product of desire or love or preparedness, but forced on them, an unwanted thing to be destroyed. That being said, the respect for human life was exemplified by Abraham, who was an archetype that changed from this older sacrificing children to God's model to respecting the life of children. Abraham was the model of replacing the sacrifice of a child with the sacrifice of an animal. And this was a major development in human culture, the rearing of children. Then this respect for children culture as it came out of Egypt in the time of Moses, it was advanced to the idea of law and order, that even the kings and pharaohs were subject to respecting law and order, and that they could be themselves judged. So we have the Ten Commandments, a next major step. And of course there was then also the development of a priesthood to kill animals and sacrifice to God, a go-between. And up until this time, after the invention of language and gods, that people had to be afraid of them. One major step here, the Norse people, with their development of boats to carry woolly mammoths, had developed ocean-wide transportation as they grew on this foundation, and they knew how to navigate by the stars. This led them to the shores of Europe and Asia and apparently South America. There's stories about the white men appearing. And there's also in the South Sea Islands evidence of this sea travel with the minerals from one area making various items found widely dispersed. So there was sea travel at a prehistoric time. And this with the hours and hours and days and nights on sea, the learning of the motion of the stars, and this led to the worship of the planets. The planets moved among the stars. Worship of Jupiter and Mars, the god of war, and so forth. And Abraham made another major contribution here. He, in this knowledge and making all these gods, that stars all rotate around in the northern hemisphere around the North Pole, and in the center of the North Pole there is nothing. So the most powerful god, here's Mars and Jupiter and Venus moving in the sky in their own orbits, the power to move among the stars, but they all move around this point where there's nothing. The most high unseen God, another concept of not worshiping physical items that was brought on by Abraham as an archetype, the worship of the unseen God, and not to make images. Another important concept that is attributed to Abraham is seeking the promised land, the land of peace where God is with man. This later came to be symbolized with the word Zion. We can read in the Psalms 137. These were the Jewish that were in captivity in Babylon, and say, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Here, Zion is the promised land, or Jerusalem, coming out of the Mount Zion. Amazing to me, the anti-Zionists today, and here this archetype to not sacrifice children, and child sacrifice is back. Just look at this woman being glorified because she sacrificed her children to Allah.
بصمت دامع بحنين الأم الدافئ، ودعته واحتضنته والدته طويلا، وطبعت على وجنتيه القبلة الأخيرة قبل لحظة الفراق الأخير بينهما، وأوصته بأن لا يعود إليها إلا شهيدا. لحظات أخيرة عاشتها ام نضال مع فلذة كبدها. أصغر الاستشهاديين.
أنا بدفع ابني للجهاد في سبيل الله، واجب علينا مكلفين شرعيا إله. يعني أنا لو بدي مثلا أعطف عليه أو إشي وأخليه يتراجع عن حاجة زي هذه ما بيكونش صح. أنا يعني بكون سويت غلط، يعني أنا بديش أمشي على عاطفتي، عاطفة الأمومة، يعني بأضحي فيها شوية لأجل أشياء أكبر من ذلك. حتى إنه يعني كمان الحاجة هذه مرتبطة بعاطفة الأمومة. ليش؟ أنا بحب ابني فبدي أختار له الأحسن والأفضل. الأحسن مش هو الحياة هذه الدنيا، لا، عندنا حياة آخرة هي السعادة الأبدية. فإذا أنا بحب ابني بختار له السعادة الأبدية.
نقلة نوعية في العمل الجهادي وإدخال عنصر النساء، فأصبحت الأم لا تعترض طريق ولدها حينما يخرج مرابطا مجاهدا.
If you look on this woman's face, it's a face of innocence, of service to God, of an innocent soul. Where does this come from? And look at this glorification of programming children to sacrifice to Allah. Child Beshmala on Prophet Muhammad and the Jews. Accurate TV, Saudi Arabia, May 7th, 2002. Our report today will be a little bit different. Because our guest will be a girl. A Muslim girl, but a true Muslim. Allah willing, may God give us the strength to give our children the same education so that the next generation of children will be true Muslims who know they are true Muslims and know who their enemies are. This child will now introduce herself. Her name is Beshmala, and I will ask her too. What is your name, Beshmala? How old are you, Beshmala? 3.5. Are you a Muslim? Yes. Beshmala, do you know the Jews? Yes. Do you like them? No. Why don't you like them? Because? Because they are what? They are apes and pigs. Because they are apes and pigs? Who said that about them? Our God. Where did he say that about them? In the Quran? He said that about them in the Quran. That's right. Beshmala, what did the Jews do? What? What did they do? The Pepsi company. So you know about the boycott too, Beshmala. Yes. Did they love our Prophet Muhammad? No. What did the Jews do to him? He killed someone. Of course, our Prophet Muhammad was strong and could kill them. In the background here, Muhammad had killed this Jewish woman's family, but allowed her to live. And she had invited him and some of his cohorts for supper at a later time. Okay. Do you know the traditions about what the Jews did to our Prophet Muhammad? Is there a story you know? Yes. Which one? The one about the Jewish woman? What did the Jewish woman do to our Prophet Muhammad? The Jewish woman? Yes. She invited the Prophet and his companions. When he asked her if she had put poison in the food, she said yes. He asked her, "Why did you do this?" She replied, "If you are a liar, you will die, and Allah will not protect you. But if you speak the truth, Allah will protect you." And God protected the Prophet, of course. And he said to his companions, "I will kill this woman." Of course, she put poison in his food, this Jewess. Basmala, Allah be praised. May our God bless her. No one could ask for a more devout girl. May God bless her and her parents. The next generation of children must be true Muslims. Allah willing.
الجاي ان شاء الله لازم هم يبقوا المسلمين الصح كده نربيهم من وهم اطفال كده ان هم يبقوا مسلمين صح.
We must educate them while they are still children to be true Muslims.
One of the campers, when asked if he wants to blow himself up as a suicide bomber, answers yes.
It's just unbelievable to me that child sacrifice is respected like this. How, I don't have words to express it, but the concept of Zion, of God with man, a city of peace, we use this word heaven on earth for this concept, but heaven being the future where we live in peace and the Spirit of truth rules. God is the Spirit of truth. Just to clarify things here, the basic reality to me is eternal. Eternal space, eternal matter in space, and eternal motion of matter in space. These are not created or destroyed. Creation is forming something like forming a hat or making a toy out of this substance, or the development of life out of this substance. This is creation, not poof magic, something out of nothing 13 billion years ago or 13,000 years ago. This to me is nonsense. But this then is the parent God, unseen, the substance from which all things are made. To me, this is like a gas in which these vortex rings form, and from them particles are created, and from them atoms are created, and from them chemical molecules are created, and from them physiology develops and multicellular life develops and we develop. And so this is the parent God. We're made from this substance. Paul said, in him we live and move and have our being. And I take this as just a self-evident truth. That then intelligence in God's body and the birth of awareness that we can go directly to our source of existence, not having to go through the veil to a priest or an imam or a pastor or a bishop or whatever you want to call them, but that we can have a personal relationship with eternity, that we are part of eternity, and we can have a consciousness and we can serve this eternity as a conscious part of it. This is the concept that Jesus the Christ brought, the firstborn, spiritually firstborn of God, one of God's children, God in a human body, that they no longer had to go to the priest and do animal sacrifice, that we could have a personal relationship with God through a healthy development of ourself. This is a predestination in a way that we have no ability to determine. It's a gift we get from the past. It's the gift that we need to give to the future. That is, to be loved, to be cared for, so that we can grow in loving ourselves. And based on this foundation, as we get to be 5 or 7, we grow to love others like self. This homosexual or homoerotic stage, boys like boys and girls like girls. And hopefully we had a foundation strong enough with a mother and father roles and a home and the love and the security to grow, that we can experience puberty and discover those not like self and be attracted to those not like self, heteroerotic, heterosexual development. And further, that we can go on based on this and care for one another, desire to create life and serve it. That this is a process that brings about a healthy future, having nothing to say about the people who were deprived of or unable genetically to develop to these through these stages and to these stages. The homosexual, they don't have the right to violate other people, and in these deprived situations, you find sadomasochism and narcissism and sociopathic and psychopathic behavior, and suicide. Look at Korea with all of its suicide because of the affluence and the breakdown of the home. These are no-brainers if we look at the reality, if we care to observe and not be brainwashed and deprived of our ability to think rationally because we've had to memorize as a child before we were even 7 years old. No child should be required to memorize before they're 12 and to remember what someone else said or what someone else did. They need to be free to grow and learn and explore. Children will learn the skills of math and language and reading and writing out of a need to know, out of curiosity. They need to be respected. This homeschooling, they tried to outlaw it in California. Did you know that the homeschooled children do better on the average than the children in schools? And another important fact, you have this professional programming of what's a teacher. Of the homeschooled children, the ones homeschooled by a mother, usually with a professional training as a teacher, the homeschooled products of a professionally trained teacher do worse than those who just go on their natural love and care for their child, responding to their child and seeking to serve that child with learning experiences. The non-professional mother teacher in the home does better than the professional teacher in the home. It should tell you something. It's a no-brainer. We got to stop this conditioning people as if there isn't natural learning and response out of love. We need to respect elders that have shown by their progeny, by their fruits you shall know them, and those are what you're respected. Those who have good fruit need to be respected and given positions of authority and judgment and leadership. This concept of healthy parenting, healthy homes, healthy grandparents, I would take to the point that grandchildren are also part of the judgment of the success of these pairs of husbands and wives and the homes they build and their progeny. And by their fruits you know them. I would take successful grandparents, not elect a man, not elect a woman, elect a pair, by their to be eligible for positions of judges and rulers, that they first of all have to show this 2 generations of successful child rearing. Yes, it does mean that a very good man might not be able to obtain office because he wasn't able to find a good mate. And it may mean that a very good woman can't find an office because she couldn't find a good mate. But what we're talking about are the people in positions of authority to be in judgment and to be rulers of a society, to build a healthy future. With all this development of language and worship for the unknown and building the concept of gods and spirits, good and evil, to worship, there were witch doctors or priests, people with the power to be respected and that they could do good or evil, and that they could go to these gods, or the unseen. One unseen god was still a priesthood. This is where Jesus the Christ comes in. He was willing to confront the evil of this domination and programming to separate people from their God, that they had to go through priests and sacrifices. And he confronted this structure and was willing to be murdered for it. He was the firstborn in this body of God, the first one to understand how this evil was working and denying the spirit of truth to indwell in people. That we now talk about a triune God. It really is just stages of development. The Father God, the eternal material substance from which all things are formed, whether a father or mother, the parent God. And in this parent God was intelligence, and the first one aware that we had a personal relationship without having to go through anyone with our source of existence. That was Jesus the Christ. He was not just aware, he was willing to make the sacrifice, and he understood enough to send 2 by 2, just like Sololinsky's Industrial Areas Foundation did such a good job sending their community organizers 2 by 2. It's very insightful on the part of Jesus the Christ, the firstborn of God's living sons. of which we all can be, have our personal relationship, and host the third part, the spirit of truth, which is corrupted by having children memorize the spirit of truth. We get from in God we live and move and have our being. From our natural experience we can grow if there is the healthy foundation that we're able to love ourselves. This stuff about hate self and love the flesh, the world, and Satan. Hate self is nonsense. We need to raise every child in their own self-love. That's natural, and it's natural for them to grow in respect for others like self. At first, everybody's like self if they have a healthy environment, and children are loving and trusting and insightful too. They pick up on their mother's fear or hatred, or their father's anger, or whatever. Their children pick up on these things more than adults sometimes. They're insightful. But that's another interesting thing. There are many skills that children are born with that, instead of increasing with time, decrease with time. Like facial recognition things, but that's a whole area of research, different. But here was the first human to entertain this awareness of a personal relationship with God, being part of God, being God's son, and willing to sacrifice, to confront the evil of a priesthood and the veil, the barrier between you and God that you had to go with, and give people something and give money to somebody for something. It was really originally the method of taxation, that there was a government. The religious authorities were the government. Now we have civil government. To give money to a church is, if you want to help somebody, that's your personal business. But the governments, we give them money to carry out these duties. If you looked into how much abuse of the not-for-profit corporations, is another thing. All these sociologists that graduate as social workers will organize not-for-profit organizations, and if you look at where the money goes, it goes to pay them a salary. They're making themselves a job. Why not have the government do it honestly, and have some reasonable elected authority over it? But rather than a bunch of propaganda and putting up sick babies with a warped face to make you give money to them, which goes to their salary. But that's another thing. So we have the three-part God: the Father, Parent, the physical universe. And from that we are created, and one born aware of our relationship with eternity. The firstborn, the model, willing to pay the sacrifice of his life. Christ, the Savior of humankind, understanding that love is so important. We must love ourselves, love our opportunity for existence. It's stated, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul and mind. That's you can't love existence if you didn't have a reasonable childhood. And love your neighbor as yourself. That assumes you love yourself. This hate self stuff is an anathema. We need to grow in love. Yes, hate sin, but love the sinner, even yourself. Hate your sin, but love yourself, and love others like yourself, and try to grow. It's true, much of this is predestined depending on what your child care was. I have a terrible problem. At 1.5 years, my father had to leave our Pennsylvania home to get work in New York. He was disabled, one leg shorter than another, so he couldn't go in the Second World War. He went to New York to get work, and my mother took a job teaching. I was a year and a half old, so here I was deprived of my maternal bond at a year and a half old, and it of course left marks, but maybe that's helping me to care about these things. Of course I need love, and I feel an emptiness is part of that early life stage. That we need to be aware of these things and respect the rights of children. Now I will show you an example of this same spirit today, of that man, Muhammad Mzouzi, or I don't pronounce the name correct, but he's so frustrated with the evil of the authorities that he confronted them and sacrificed himself and opened up the revolution taking place, confronting evil dominance throughout the Arab world.
Ammar is a man in mourning. His stepson Mohammed Bouazizi set fire to himself in mid-December.
He climbed up on his fruit stand and he poured petrol on himself. He climbed up there.
They say the 26-year-old fruit and vegetable seller had been pushed to the brink by police harassment. Mohammed's fruit stand now sits in this garage in Sidi Bouzid in central Tunisia and still bears the traces of his dramatic act of defiance. It set off riots across the country, which brought down an autocratic regime which had ruled for 23 years. Other market traders, many unlicensed like Bouazizi, identify with the city's new hero.
He was a victim of these people who made a lot of money, who were doing deals. It's always the poorest who pay the highest price.
Sidi Bouzid is a poor rural city, far from the tourist resorts on the coast. At the Bouazizi family home, the walls pay homage to the young man, and the house is full of well-wishers. His mother keeps his bedroom as the day he died.
That's where he slept. That's his shirt. May my son go to paradise.
Before her son died, the now ex-president Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali visited him in hospital.
I said, Mr. President, I want my son. I don't want anything else. Nothing can replace him. He was the centre of my home.
Even amidst the grief and anger, the Bouazizis are proud. For them, he made the ultimate sacrifice in order to protest against years of abuse at the hands of a corrupt regime. Around 20 kilometers away, in the middle of a field, is a cemetery where Mohammed is laid to rest. His brother Salem is convinced it was his brother's courage that brought about an end to Ben Ali's rule.
I feel like he's liberated the whole of Tunisia and all the Tunisian people. I hope he'll liberate the whole Arab world.
Several people in other Arab countries have since copied.
Can you see that this young man who cared for his family, his father died when he was 10 or 11, and he helped his mother and cared for his siblings. He grew in love and responsibility and in frustration with evil authority that he had to put up with. And out of a concept of caring, he was willing to sacrifice himself. This is something of Christ's spirit, even though he might not have been aware of it. And I'll end this overview to help organize the development of society and all of its information. I'll end it with an example of a man who did understand the sacrifice and paid the ultimate sacrifice anyway.
Minister Bhatti, we forgot one question in the interview. Your life is threatened. By whom? And what sort of threats are you receiving?
The forces of violence, militant band organization, the Taliban and pro-Al-Qaeda. They want to impose their radical philosophy in Pakistan. And whoever stand against their radical philosophy, they threaten them. When I'm leading this campaign against the Sharia laws, for the abolishment of blasphemy law, and speaking for the oppressed and marginalize persecuted Christian and other minority. These Taliban threaten me. But I want to share that I believe in Jesus Christ, who has given his own life for us. I know what is the meaning of cross, and I am following of the cross. And I am ready to die for a cause. I am living for my community and suffering people, and I will die to defend their rights. So these threats and these warnings cannot change my opinion and principles. I will prefer to die for my principle and for the justice of my community rather to compromise against on these threats. Thank you.
Here's a little clip with the man speaking, showing that he was fully aware of the threat and sacrifice that may be in his future.
Continued to stream out of the burnt buildings in Gojra long after Saturday's mob had spent its fury. Gojra is a sleepy little town in Pakistan's largest Punjab province. But it exploded into national limelight on Thursday when a Muslim mob torched dozens of Christian homes during a marriage ceremony.
This issue was based on an allegation which was made by some miscreants that somebody from the Christian community desecrated the Holy Quran.
Subsequently, the incensed and heavily armed Muslim mob opened fire on the neighborhood and then stormed it. Several houses were set ablaze and the Christians fled for their lives. Eventually, riot police were called in to control the situation. Rescue workers are still digging through the debris of the charred buildings for bodies. Most of those recovered so far are of women and children.
Pakistani Minister for Minority Shahbaz Bhatti has been shot dead in an attack in Islamabad. The shooting, which took place as Bhatti travelled by car, has been claimed by Pakistani Taliban militants. The only Christian in the Pakistan cabinet, Bhatti has called for changes in the country's controversial blasphemy law. He is the second senior official killed for speaking out against the law.
As Shahbaz Bhatti's car came from this side, a white Toyota Miran came from the other side. Two men got out of the Toyota, and first they came to the back seat and fired, and then they moved to the front and fired on the windscreen.
Under the anti-blasphemy law, anyone speaking ill of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad commits a crime and faces the death penalty. It has been under the spotlight since November, when a court sentenced a Christian mother of 4 to death because of a village dispute, creating rifts in the country.
I've completed my purpose, which was to gain some clarity, to organize the topics under the heading of society. I use biological background and societal background, and then go into culture, where I use culture meaning the rearing of children. So I will stop now and use this video as to make an outline from which I can then improve to organize the things under society. Thank you.